AskReddit by board certain 5373. Those who disowned their parents. What was the final straw? My sibling died and in the days leading up to his funeral my mother was so exquisitely awful that I stopped fantasizing about harming her and began fantasizing about my life in prison after her murder. At one point I was standing behind her at the top of a flight of stairs as she monologued about how everything was my fault. I could have pushed her but instead promised myself that after I made it through the funeral I'd never speak with her again. This year marks a decade since I last spoke with her and my only regret is not cutting her out of my life earlier. It also took a death to finally go and see with mom. She was so horrible after my daughter died I would wear earbuds whenever I was around her. One day they ran out of battery. The next day I went and see. There truly wasn't one. It just was so much, for so long that I just stopped. My mom was too proud ever to call me because in her head, she deserved to be called. My father chose to cut me out of his life when my wife asked him not to wear shoes in the house. Death by 1,000 cuts. My situation is similar and my mother is absolutely of the mindset that the onus is on me to mend this relationship. I always read these threads because I find comfort knowing that so many other people have similar experiences, family dynamics, and chose the peaceful path of least resistance. No contact gives me the opportunity to process and heal. It was a long time coming. But the straw that broke the camel's back was berating me for not coming to a family function when I told my father that I had something that was completely unskippable at work. I had been abused by my father for years, his way of getting back at me for my mother leaving him I suppose. I just lost it at him and told him what I thought of him. I haven't spoken to him or his family that all took his side every single time in 15 years. Honestly, having to cut your parents out of your life, even if they abused you badly, is one of the hardest and most difficult decisions a person could make. Nobody wants to admit to themselves that the people who gave birth to them never loved them or are toxic and refuse to change. It was a long process, but it really ended when my mom tried to sue my wife and me for grandparents' rights. Anything after that would have only helped her to build a case to legally kidnap our son. Same reason here. Sad to think that it's a common experience. Nothing else my parents did felt bad enough to go no contact, even though it was. The guilt and gaslighting always made us come back. But this was undeniably awful and we finally had proof. Mother was a career crackhead. I traveled 15 hours by Greyhound bus back to Illinois to help her finish up some roofing jobs still incomplete. She intentionally got in a fight with me at the bus station after the jobs were done, didn't get me a ticket back, and ghosted me on $2,500. I had maybe $30 to my name at the time. Then she shut off my cell phone immediately after driving away. Had to walk about 5 miles to a friend's house. He and a few of my other friends drove me back down to Alabama that night. Never spoke to her again. Damn. I want to adopt you and give you some respect and love. I had a kid and realized I didn't want them having any influence in her life. Their influence on mine was bad enough. My story as well. After telling them I was getting divorced, they told me 1. My ex would always be their son and that they loved him more than me. To be fair, they did try to backtrack and say they loved us both. 2. That no one else would ever love me and I'd realize I was ruining my life when I died alone. 3. They only loved me because the Bible said they had to. 4. That they were writing me out of their will and leaving it to my ex, because this was proof I was mentally unstable and once I'd come to my senses and gone back to him it would be mine anyway. They were emotionally abusive my whole life but I kept going back and making excuses for them, not helped because my ex was abusive too. It's easy to believe you deserve to be treated badly when it's all people are telling you. Eventually I realized that I deserved to be happy and I just couldn't do that while continuing a relationship with them. They're never going to change. I think they honestly believe they're saying these things out of love and have no awareness of how they've hurt me. Man, that's just awful. I really hope you left it all behind, and that you're doing better now. I didn't want to be a Scientologist anymore. Raised from birth to believe that bullshit. Took me like 20 years to get my head straight. I know this may sound strange, but the idea of a lifelong Scientology family is just the strangest concept. Like, Scientology always seemed like a corporation or business to me more than anything. An MLM. I guess it kind of lacks that veneer of credibility an organization has after being around for a really long time. Glad you're out and finding your own way. The world is a weird fucking place. We don't need things like Scientology mucking it up even more. Mom got arrested for child neglect and animal cruelty. I can't believe no one else has commented on this. Is there more to this that you would like to share? That sounds terrible. I'm sorry. When my dad said he didn't blame my brother at all for trying to stab me, that was the final straw for me. Going on 18 years of no contact. Don't see it ever changing. My dad used to like to blame me for killing my mother by stressing her out too much when she was sick with cancer. I was 10 at the time she passed and he would say it's partly why my grandparents hated me so much. Are these people defective or really trying to hurt us for no reason? She stole my student loan money. I worked so hard to get into college and have a full scholarship, and she stole my room and board and book money. It made the first year of college damn near impossible, which kinda set the tone for the next 3. That's horrible. I'm so sorry you went through that. When they threatened to ruin my job and prevent my employment, my lying and staged an intervention to coerce me into corroborating their BS. No contact going on 7 years and it's never been better. When I was looking at bridal gowns, I found myself looking at shapeless, full coverage dresses because I didn't want my dad acting all creepy and handsy make gross comments about my appearance. The thought of him walking me down the aisle made me nauseous. Then I thought WTF, just don't invite him, and I didn't. My now husband and I walked down the aisle together. Haven't spoken to my dad since 2019 and my life has never been better. I knew my father would create drama at my wedding. My mom, stepdad, leave it to beaver-in-laws, siblings, everyone. So I did the same. My grandfather found out and refused to come as well. It hurt. I had my reasons. I tried to make nice with my grandfather. He's old. Told me no dice till I mended fences with my father. Tried. He copped a feel on my wife. Never did I think that would happen. Thought maybe we might get drunk and fight or something, but no. Dropped him off at the airport. Done. Just fucking done. The situation with my abusive parent got to the point where I was so depressed and at the end of my rope that I was very, very close to ending everything. At that point, I had no choice but to walk away or end up 6 feet under. My only regret is waiting until my late 40s to finally walk away. Wish I had the courage to do it 30 years earlier. Hey, good on you for walking away at all. I don't think waiting until your late 40s was so bad, because you had your own life and accomplishments to rely on. As someone who had the courage to walk away, move away to a different country to escape, at 18, I became super suicidal anyway and keep crawling back asking for crumbs of attention and praise, only to have a meltdown and ending up screaming down the phone at my mother, now day 2 after my latest blow up. I'm not saying this would have happened to you, but in your late teens early 20s when you have nothing of your own yet, it gets rough. Some people my age are super independent already and have their own home, but I wasn't so lucky. Maybe that gives you some comfort and stop you looking back with regret. For me, it was a respect issue. I was pregnant with my first, and I know that miscarriages happen more frequently than people know, and I told my mom to not tell anyone. Not even her family, no one. I couldn't have stressed that enough, and I told her my reasons. Well, she disrespected that and told literally everyone. That was it for me. It was just the last straw and I had enough. Good call. She would no doubt completely undermine your authority as a parent and ignore all boundaries with your kid. My father was an incestuous pedophile. I hadn't seen him since I was 5. I had always craved a fatherly relationship, so I decided to meet with him when I was 19. The main condition for us being in contact was total honesty. I stupidly thought our candid conversations weren't just more lies from him. A few weeks later, he made a lewd call to my 21-year-old sister. She called me in tears. I called him and threatened to kill him if he ever contacted any of us again. His wife called and tried to blame it on him being bipolar. Bipolar is awful, but it doesn't make you incestuous. He died in 2010. No one should ever deal with this. I'm sorry. Good on you for protecting your sister. It's a lot of things mixed together, but the final straw I think is when you finally realize and accept that they are who they are without remorse and they will probably never change. It was a long process, but my mother had borderline personality. She decided that I had wronged her in some way, so she came to my apartment at 3 AM banging on the door to present me with a bill for my upbringing. I called the cops on her for trespassing and I just decided I was done. My mother gave me a long speech about the morality of being a lesbian a couple of days before I, a woman, got married to my wife. She's pretty high up on her horse for a drug addict who stole from me. Worst thing about drug addicts is when they suddenly become very religious. Nothing too dramatic. I simply messaged her and was ignored. After racking my brain for any perceived slight I would have to grovel for, I just let it go. I simply told myself that if she needed anything or had an issue to discuss with me, she could reach out. Never heard from her again. I heard later from a sibling that after she missed the stream of my wedding, she told everyone I changed the time of my wedding to spite her LMAO. My mom had an affair behind my dad's back and they divorced. I tried to be there for both until my mom started talking about living with her permanently, meeting her new man and pretty much cutting my dad off. That wasn't gonna happen, but I still tried to be around. I found out she was doing coke a little while after that. Okay, whatever. I can forgive that. She started asking me, a 14-year-old at the time, for money I didn't have. Soon it became less about actually giving a shit about me and more about the child support checks she'd receive if I took her side. I walked in on my dad, drunk as hell, loaded gun on the table, sobbing after I came home from my mom's one weekend. After seeing that and how badly it tore my dad apart and how little my mom gave a fuck, I decided to cut her off right there. It's been almost 15 years since I've talked to her. I don't regret my decision. How is your relationship with your dad now? Parents got divorced between 12 and 14. During that period my dad became an evangelical Christian. All of a sudden, everything revolved around God and Jesus. This continued until he moved to the US when I was 18. Because America is doing the Lord's work, he completely ghosted his 2 teenage children and started a new Christian family. He came to visit one time. He never met his 3 grandchildren and died in 2022. It had been 17 years since I had seen him. I did not go to the funeral because, to me, he had been dead a long time. After 50 plus years of crazy, I decided I would prefer to have a peaceful life built on my own terms. Just because I am their kid doesn't mean I have a lifetime obligation to participate in their insanity. That is exactly the point I'm at as well. The peace and quiet is new and a bit disarming. I often feel as though I'm walking on eggshells and a new disaster is about to strike, but they are out of my life, so the disaster will never come. I was in recovery for alcohol. My brother is a drunk and she's the enabler. The final straw was me asking her to come celebrate my 2 years sobriety and her suggesting a brewery. I asked if she had considered why I wouldn't like going there since every item was alcohol themed, and she cried about how she just never gets things right and doesn't understand why I hate her so much. So I told her to get therapy and that we were no longer speaking. This is a pattern of hers where she's the victim after thoughtfully composing a plan that would hurt me but make her look like a doting mother. This is after she so lovingly moved an adult addict into our home when I was 14 and made me live with that person stealing and verbally assaulting me for years. She has picked him repeatedly. Wow, she really tried to set you up for failure. You're so much better off without that in your life. My dad and I were already arguing via messenger after he said answer me regarding a question he asked about my mom that was none of his business. Long story shortish, during our argument I somehow ended up bringing up how he picked on me mercilessly when I was a teen and forced me to hide my face anytime I watched TV with the family so he wouldn't have to see me twitch because I have Tourette's syndrome. His only response was that I do not have Tourette's. That was one of the worst times of my life and it really made me ask why the FK I should even bother keeping in contact with him. So now I don't. Apologies for the run-on sentences.